2019 was a bit of a year for me. There was military enlistment, there was going back to school, but through it all, there were me and my books. Lots of reading. And there are a couple books that aren't actually part of this channel, and I'd like to recommend them for you. There's no ranking, no set list, and the only recurring theme was an accidental one. All of them happen to be nonfiction. I got like 5 or 6 to go through. There you go. Carpenter's book is the authorized biography of Tolkien's life. His writing uses the Silmarillion and the construction of the languages of Middle-earth as a narrative framework throughout Tolkien's life, as when he was a boy, his time in school, his short military career, his friendship with C.S. Lewis, and of course the publishing of his stories. The Silmarillion and the Elven languages were here before there was a hobbit in the hole in the ground. Carpenter also tries to pinpoint parts of Tolkien's life as inspiration for events in his book, some being a bit of a long shot, like how a spider bite when he was a toddler was a direct influence for Shelob. Despite that, I do recommend any fans of Middle-earth to read this if they haven't already, as it does offer some context for your next time in reading Tolkien. While sounding like a self-help book, Seven Pillars of Wisdom is actually the memoir of T.E. Lawrence. He was a military advisor from Britain, assisting in the Arabian Revolt against the Ottoman Turks during World War I. Or, to put it into another context, he was the guy that was on the Desert Campaign in Battlefield 1. Lawrence describes in detail his cooperation with various tribal elders in rallying a group of guerrilla fighters against the Ottoman infrastructure involving lots and lots of dynamite. The main drawback with this book was that because it was written during its time, the references and certain people and events aren't as familiar to us as to readers 100 years ago. But I still do recommend it, in large part because it was these events that started to shape the basic issues that are happening in the Middle East today. While Paul Dini was working on the Batman animated series, he was mugged in the middle of the night, not just breaking him physically, but emotionally, putting him into a spiral of depression. Written by Dini, A Dark Knight is a comic book recreation of how he brought himself back from that moment in his life, with the inclusion of the very characters he was writing about. Less of an exact recreation, Dini is having imaginary conversations with Batman and other characters throughout the comic, with Batman lecturing him on self-discipline and realization, while the Joker is playing into Dini's self-doubt and depression and indulgence with alcohol and self-isolation. If the story of trauma and recovery isn't enough incentive to check this out, there is a little behind-the-scenes part in the book where Dini pitched an episode where Batman met Dream and Death from Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. Unfortunately, it didn't make it past that pitch, but a little nice extra all the same. Alright, this was something I had to read for a college paper, but I still recommend this one. Al-Sayed looks into the history of Egypt's capital all the way from before Cairo was even Cairo, and its naming by the Fatimids 1,000 years ago. The more important thing is how Al-Sayed told this story's very, very long history. Each chapter focusing on a certain structure in the city, a fortress, a mosque, for example, and he uses that as a springboard to explain the region's history and layout. Very much recommend this to anyone with an interest in ancient Egypt. YouTuber AJ Thompson, going by the channel name The Gaming Muse, has been writing episodes breaking down the symbolism of nearly all aspects of horror games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. I Got a Letter is Thompson writing about Silent Hill 2, focusing on graffiti art, character motivation, stuff like that. This was 100% fan-made, meaning that there are some hindrances where I wish Thompson was given permission to publish, like screenshots from the game. Thompson does her best in putting fan art and little things like that to give the book a little bit more flair, like bloodstains on the pages. There was an issue that Thompson would cite her sources, but only list them in the back of the book without a citation note in the passage, making it difficult to look up some of her references when she's written about, say, a character's actions based on trauma victims. I still recommend this book because as much as Silent Hill and Resident Evil games have been around and been so influential, there isn't much written work about them, especially written works that delve into the psychological or artistic merit of these games, despite how ubiquitous they are. Uh, Thompson's got that covered, though. To Offer Compassion covers a relatively unknown aspect of history regarding the political climate in pre-Roe v. Wade America. The fact that there was a large system of priests and rabbis offering aid for cheap and, more importantly, safe access to abortions for financially struggling women with the Clergymen Consultation Service on Abortion. Dirksen Ralph follows the beginning and motivation of the organization's founders, breaking down exactly how this type of service was even legally possible in a time and place where abortion was either outright illegal or extremely limited. As the discussion of abortion goes farther and farther away, and the people that fought for and against access to it are dying from old age, books like To Offer Compassion are extremely important to look up. And that's it. That's what I got so far. I did notice that this list was strictly non-fiction books, but the fact was most of the fiction I was reading last year were meant for my Taking a Page episodes. The price you pay working 3 jobs and going to school. Not a lot of time to read. Still, if anyone has a recommendation for me, fact, fiction, or otherwise, leave a comment. I'm always looking for new books to read.